So thanks, Ashley. I was listening to you and I thought I did all that. Okay. I've been busy. So hey everyone, thanks for being here. It's gonna be fun. I'm gonna share my screen in a second because I have images, I have examples, I have things I can show you. And as far as what we're gonna be talking about today, so we're diving into 4 strategies that are low prep or no prep, mostly no prep, I promise, for how you can keep your students reading, writing, speaking, and listening consistently all year long. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, that's not, oh, where'd it go? There we go. Okay. All right. Are we seeing this? I hope we're looking at the right thing. Yeah. Okay. 4 ways to engage our middle school students. So this is about getting them actively involved in what's happening in the classroom, rather than you feeling like you have to create everything and do everything and carry the learning all by yourself. We want our students to be the ones who are actually doing that. And the goal is to do it consistently so that this is happening all year long, so that students are embedding all 4 of those strands, reading, writing, speaking, listening, as they move through your classroom. I know for a lot of us as middle school English language arts teachers, it's overwhelming. We don't have enough time to teach all the things we're supposed to teach, right? And so you think, okay, obviously reading and writing, that's what we do. And then I don't know, somehow I'm supposed to have like a speaking lesson and then like a listening lesson, and they have to do speaking and listening, and I need them to be able to speak academically. I need them to use the domain specific or genre specific vocabulary and all these things. When am I going to do that? There's not enough time. And so that's what we're here to do today. I'm going to show you how you can embed all of this together. Okay, so I'm not going to play gatekeeper on this. I'm not going to make you wait for what the 4 strategies are. I'm going to give them to you right away. These are the 4 strategies: tense for talking, scoot, game of quotes, and then using free writing based on quotes and images. So I have examples, pictures, and I'm going to walk you through each of these items. Also, let me tell you, if you're grabbing screenshots right now of this, or if you're, panicking over how quickly I'm going to go through slides, do you have enough time to write everything down? Let me just assure you that everything I show you tonight, you're getting a copy of. So you're getting a copy of this, these slides, the images I show you. There are a few little things I'm going to click on to open up new files to show you examples of things. You're getting all of it. So just relax, enjoy the information here. Maybe keep track of questions because we'll have some time for Q&A at the end in case you want to share ideas, or if you have any clarification that you want on something, if you want me to go deeper on a particular topic. Like, take notes on those kinds of things that you might want to ask, but don't stress over trying to like grab screenshots or take a bunch of notes because you're getting everything here. So I hope that allays any amount of stress you might have had over like, I need a pen, where's my phone so I can grab screenshots. So all right, so this one, tense for talking, this, oh my gosh, I use this one all the time. So here's the deal. Tense for talking is a method that provides confidence and consistent practice for students to get them speaking to each other about what they're reading. Doesn't matter what genre it is, but if you've ever been in the classroom, right, and it's time for students to discuss, like I'm supposed to at some point have them discuss with each other what we just read, and you do the whole, turn and talk to your partner for 30 seconds, come up with an answer to this prompt, and then we're all going to share out, right? We've all done that. And then your students are done in 5 seconds and really nothing was accomplished and they're not even on task, and you're just like, okay, this doesn't work. Okay, tense for talking completely solves that problem. I have used this for years and I've refined it and developed it into what it is now. So if you can see, tense for talking, it starts with, I just grabbed this off my printer. It's just a plain sheet of paper, printer size. Folded it horizontally. It's a tent, okay? Since this is printer paper, this is just for an example, but it creates a tent. You set it on their desk. Let me tell you, use cardstock paper. Don't use printer paper. I just didn't have any cardstock paper handy, but this is essentially what it is. It's a tent. And on each side of the tent are question stems and sentence stems that students can use in their small groups to help engage them in talking academically about whatever the piece of reading literature was that you just went over as a class. Tense for talking. it really helps, your ESL or your ELL students. They may not have the confidence yet or the vocabulary knowledge yet to be able to talk academically about what they read. And so this is something that it gives them tools they can use so that they can actually start conversing with each other so that they're not just looking at the word and hearing you say the word, right? Like plot or characterization or symbolism. They're not just hearing you say it, they're seeing it, they're using it themselves, because that's what goes on these tents. And then it benefits you as the teacher because it saves you time. Because once I'm giving you an entire set of these, I'll show them to you in a second. But these are things you can pull out and you can plop one on every, student group, with every student group, anytime. So instead of, scrambling for a worksheet or trying to figure out, what activity your students are going to do to help them express their learning from whatever it is you just read, you can use these, and you can use them over and over and over again. I wouldn't use them every day, of course, but you could definitely use them once a week. And I have some for every genre: fiction, nonfiction, literary nonfiction, argumentation, poetry, drama. And so it's just such a handy tool to be able to pull out. It's one tent per group so that your students can actually take ownership of what they're learning. So let me go ahead and just show you what it actually looks like. See here where we have the clickable little pointers here? When you get this presentation here that I'm showing you, these slides, everything is clickable so that you can also access the material. So this is what the front side of that tent might look like. This is a short story tent. That means that these question stems and these sentence stems are all based on elements of fiction. These stems came from the standards as far as how would this look on a standardized test. Not that I want to teach to the test, but that's kind of the reality. And so, when we're talking about a short story, one side of the tent looks like this. You notice the academic terminology that we're using: turning point, conflicts, resolution, antagonist, inciting incident. So your students use these stems to help each other in their small groups talk about, in this case, a short story that they just read. And then the other side of the tent might look like this. And so the questions are, they're based on the standards, right? The standards-based questions, but they're also geared towards opening up conversations and dialogue between students about something they just read, like this one. My favorite part of the rising action is when. So the way you can do this in class is, if you have, let's say you have a group of 5 students, you put all your students in groups of 4 or 5. Each group would get one of these tents, and then your students actually get to handle it. They get to turn it around. They get to choose which one they're going to read aloud to their group, and then another student in the group gets to answer it. And you can see how this would lend itself really well to keeping students on task, so they are truly reading, writing, speaking, and listening about a passage that they just read. And you're giving them the vocabulary, which boosts their confidence as far as hearing the words, seeing the words, talking, hearing each other use the words. So it's not just you as the teacher using these same words over and over again, and then it goes in one ear and out the other. As far as the writing component, this also can be used as an exit ticket. So on days where we are doing the tents for talking, I like to end class where I tell my students, for your exit ticket, choose one of the sentence stems, write it down, finish the sentence, explain your answer, and then that's your exit ticket out of the room. So you're getting this right here. You're getting the short story tent. We have all genres here. There's one on poetry. Some of them are just words even. Like this one's expository. So these are just words where you can tell, in some cases you might want to give students a fuller sentence stem. In other cases, you might just want to give them some genre-specific words and have them do a little bit more of the work. You can scaffold these tents, moving from something like this, where half the sentence is already there for them, to something more like this, where you're just giving them the basic, genre-specific vocabulary words, and then they have to form the sentences around it. But so, you can differentiate, you can scaffold. So that's a Google Slides version I gave you, but I also wanted to point out here, you can click here and you can get the printable PDF version. It's going to open up on my computer. Let's see. Here we go. I'll do the short story one again, just so you can see. When you print this out, notice this one's upside down. It's because when you print it out on your paper and then you fold it, it'll it'll work. And again, use cardstock. This paper is just to serve it as an example today, but if you put this on a student's desk, it's just gonna go flat. Cardstock works really well. It's thin enough for the printer, but it's sturdy enough to actually stand up on the desk. Tense for talking. So that's a strategy that I love, and I love to do that. Okay, so thinking about that one, just a few things to consider. When you're introducing tense for talking, this is not something that I would ever give my students and just give it to them in groups and just explain it to them, because that can result in chaos. So just a few tips here for if you're ready to implement tense for talking, but you want it to go really smoothly. Tip number one is that you're going to want to model this for your students. They need to see what using tense in a small group looks like and what it sounds like. And so what I like to do is I like to model it for them by putting myself into a group with other students. So I will sit down at what I like to call my teacher table, usually in like the center of the classroom. I'll have 3 students come and sit with me and say, okay, we're going to model this for everybody. And so we have the tent. Perhaps it's based on a story that we already read at the beginning of the week. So going back to the fiction tent that I just showed you, maybe we read a short story yesterday, and so today I'm going to introduce the tent for talking, right? And so I'm going to sit down with my students. I'm going to actually call the students that are sitting the farthest away in the classroom to come up and stand near us. I want everyone kind of gathered around, because one of the things that I'm going to teach through tense for talking is that, let's say I have 6 groups in the class, right? Like I've got 30 students in the class. Maybe I'm going to have 5 students in each group. So that's 6 groups, right? One of the things I want to show them and model for them when using tense for talking is that this is my voice level. I'm not talking in my group so that everybody in the classroom can hear. That's why I pull students over against the wall. Y'all come over here. Just kind of gather up, because I'm going to run this group using the exact, I'm going to drop my voice, using the exact voice volume that I want my students to use. So that's the first thing. I'm modeling it. I want them to hear it. And so I tell them, that's why I had you come from that side of the room and that side of the room, because I need you to hear, this is as loud as I'm going. I'm talking to the people literally right here, but I want y'all to hear too, because I'm trying to show you how to do this. The second thing I tell them in this moment, as we're moving through and